but there is lots to show from Bhutan, so no worries. What we're looking at here is the Bhutanese flag. Bhutan is called the land of the thunder dragon in Dzongkha, the local language. And dragons are really common symbols in all over the country on buildings. They denote power and loyalty, and the king's formal title is actually the Dragon King, which I don't know, I just think dragons are cool. So we'll just have a quick orientation before we get to the pretty birds. First off, where in the world is Bhutan? It's not the most well-known of countries. It is exactly halfway around the world from us, a little bit further south, about the same as southern Florida, but it's completely landlocked, and it's mostly mountainous. As you can see here, the Himalayas are on the northern half of Bhutan. It's about 150 miles. I'm going to turn on my laser pointer here. It's about Mount Everest is over here in Nepal. It's about 100 where my little red dot is. It's about 150 miles from Mount Everest. Bhutan's tallest mountain is 24,000 feet. It's called Jomolhari relative to Everest at 29,000 feet. It's one of the smallest countries in Asia. It's about only 180 miles from east to west, and it's only 90 miles from north to south. So it's much smaller than Illinois. You could fit two of them in Illinois and still have room left over. And it's not very populous. It only has 800,000 people. Compare that to Taiwan, say, which is about the same geographic size, but they have 24 million people. So really, really sparsely populated. Zooming into the country, you might recognize this as an eBird trip report. This tracks each of the blue and red markers represent all of the places we stopped to look for birds. And we started over here in the west at Paro, because that's the only place flat enough for an airport. So that's where everybody starts in Bhutan. And no one from Illinois would call it flat in anything that we're used to looking at, but it's where they built the airport. So and we worked our way east from Paro, and we took a few little side roads, but mostly we stuck to this main road across the middle of the country. And you'll notice that there are not many roads or towns in Bhutan, compared to the India is down here on the southern border of Bhutan, and there's lots of roads going on there, even zoomed out at this scale. But you don't see any of those little roads in Bhutan because they're really not there. There's just this one main road that we traveled. It's paved between Paro and Thimphu, the capital. But shortly after Thimphu, it turns into a single lane, and then it's unpaved for I'd say at least 2/3 of the length. So it makes traveling in Bhutan very slow and very dusty and very bumpy. And in fact, it took us almost 2 full days to drive back from the farthest east point we got. But slow travel when you're birding, there's nothing wrong with that. There's just more birds along the way to see. So why would people go to Bhutan? Well, it is believed by some to be the basis for the story of Shangri-La, the myth of Shangri-La, which was a hidden Himalayan valley in the novel Lost Horizon, where people don't age and everyone is at peace and life is perfect. That may or may not be true, but even so, Bhutan is idyllic in a lot of ways, which I hope to give you a sense of as we go along. But what is true is that Bhutan has an extraordinary number of birds and mammals and plants, so much so that it's designated an international biodiversity hotspot. So it's a chance to see a whole lot of birds in this very small, spot of the world, and especially to see birds that would be very difficult to see anywhere else. It has a lot of endemic birds, so found pretty much only in this very small region. 715 species of birds have been seen in Bhutan so far. Most of those are, I should say about 70% are residents that breed there. It also has 200 species of mammals, 5,600 flowering plants, including lots of rhododendrons and orchids and primroses and begonias. So why so many there? It's mostly due to the varied terrain which the big changes in altitude over small spaces leads to many different habitats, and so you've got specialists in all these different habitats, from the forest, lowland forests, to the highest mountaintops. It's a good timing to leave Chicago weather-wise. There's not much going on in November, so I was happy to escape for some more exciting places. This is our traveling caravan. The birders traveled in the blue and white bus, and our cooks were in the white truck and the tent. Only the cooks stayed in the tent. We had a very nice night. We stayed in very nice, comfortable, clean hotels. One of the most fun parts of the trip was our outdoor breakfast and lunch every day, which I was kind of skeptical at first, I guess, how that was really going to work. But in the end, it was great. It turned out wonderfully. Our routine was to leave the hotel at 6 o'clock in the morning. We would bird along the road. All of our birding was along the road because there aren't trails. Bhutan doesn't have a really developed system of trails, and but like I said, driving was very restricted. But there's not much traffic, so birding along the roadside was perfectly safe, and there were plenty of things to see. So we would bird along the road for a while and stop at 8:30 for breakfast. Our cooks would travel ahead of us. They would find a nice scenic location to set up for our meal, and they managed amazingly to produce this a terrific variety of foods. We had delicious food, hot food, drinks, fruits, all kinds of stuff. They served it all outside on real plates and real silverware, no plastic. And then we repeated that routine for lunch. And so we had these great picnic breakfasts and lunch, and it was delightful and convivial and educational. So really, just really one of the best parts about the trip. I've divided these slides up into categories of my own making. We saw 247 species of birds, which is, of course, way too many to think about showing you in one brief talk. So this is just a subset that made sense to me. And so I want to start with river birds. And they're river birds because Bhutan doesn't have many lakes. What it does have is lots and lots of rivers and streams and trickles running down the mountainside and waterfalls. And frequently, streams are coming down the mountain and running right across the road. This is a typical river view. The rivers originate in the mountains, so many are glacial in origin. They're icy, icy cold very fast, and they have these shallow rocky flats that birds, a lot of sort of wading birds, like to hang out on. And it does seem like pretty much every inch of reasonably flat land is used for rice growing along the edges of the rivers and the river bottoms. So rice is the predominant crop grown in Bhutan, and this is just the rice fields are really beautiful. These brown fields have been harvested already. Okay. First birds, ruddy shell ducks we saw at the sewage treatment ponds, which are, great places to look for birds. We see these ruddy shell ducks here in the States occasionally as escapees from captivity. And surprisingly, despite all the water that's present in Bhutan, there were very few duck species that we saw. We saw green-winged teal, the same ones we have here, and northern shovelers. Eurasian and Eurasian widgeons were the only other ducks we saw. I assume that's because most of the water is just too fast moving to make ducks comfortable. This is a white-capped redstart. There's 10 different species of redstarts in Bhutan, but they're not closely related to our American redstart, the warbler. They behave more like flycatchers, and they're often found around rivers and streams, and even these tiny trickles running down the hillsides. The redstart, this redstart actually has some red on its tail, but a lot of them don't. Start is the English word for tail, so hence we have redstart, meaning red tail. So we'll see a few more of redstarts along the way here. These are a slaty-backed forktail and a little forktail. They're tail bobbers who hang out around streams, big streams, little streams, any kind of like the redstarts, pretty much any kind of water that's moving will have a forktail running around. They're very energetic birds, really fun to watch as they dash around the boulders and the water splashes over them. They pick food off the rocks. They're easy to spot, of course, because they were out in the open and they're active. So that makes them very popular with us bird watchers. Here's a crested kingfisher. You probably would recognize this as a kingfisher. Sure. The photo doesn't give any sense of scale, but it's the biggest kingfisher of 9 species that are found in Bhutan, and it's about 1.5 times bigger than our belted kingfisher. So it's kind of a monster for a kingfisher. And just, 9 species of kingfishers. I was kind of blown away by that compared to our one. Here's another kingfisher we saw several times, the white-throated kingfisher, which is so beautiful with that electric blue back and wings. It's surprisingly hard to see, despite the color, when there's, it's seen. We're of course zoomed in on this picture. We were actually looking at the bird from far away, and when you've got all that moving water and sparkles going on behind it, it was harder than I would have thought to find that bird sitting up on its rock. Here is a river lapwing. These are near threatened birds. They're also endemics, only found from northeast India across Nepal and Bhutan to Myanmar. It's a very handsome bird, and you would think with those strong black and white markings it would be easy to find, but if it's not moving, it looks just like a rock. And these are the birds that make you really glad you have 3 pro guides spotting for you, because if we didn't have the guides, I would not have seen 70% of these birds. Oops. Here's an interesting bird, you know, family-wise, I guess. It's in its own family, so it's a monotypic bird, doesn't have any close relatives. It's an ibisbill. It's not threatened, but it's darn hard to get to most places it lives. Bhutan, Nepal, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. It's another hard to see bird because it blends in so well with the rocks, but that bill is really impressive, and it was you know, it was fun to watch it stick its head all the way down under the water to feed. Here's a brown dipper. These are also they're very engaging birds because they're jumping in and out of the water, just like our American dipper that you may have seen out west. Little cute little birds. Here's another perhaps familiar looking bird, the common sandpiper. It looks just like our spotted sandpiper. I mean, just like it. So you can see the spotted sandpiper here in the inset. It's sort of the Eurasian equivalent of our spotted sandpiper, and it's in the same genus, and it has unlike a lot of these birds, it has a very wide distribution across Asia and Europe. This was one of our first endangered birds, the Pallas's fish eagle. It's sitting on a riverbank overlooking the river. The Himalayas make up half of their range, and the other half is in Mongolia. They're not at all common, but they are in the same genus as our bald eagle. So you can see the obvious, white head is similar, but they are closely related. Okay, my next category is cryptic birds, which I've illustrated here with another redstart. This one, the plumbeous redstart. You see how the speckles on its breast match that rock so perfectly. And the point I want to make with this section is that, photos in general are really deceiving. We're taking them from really far away, but we zoom in with the lens, of course, and then we crop the photos to make the birds the focal point of the image. So it leads to the impression that the birds are up close right in front of us, and nothing could be further from the truth. So I really do want to thank our fantastic guides, Josh Engel from Red Hill Birding, and our two local guides, Norbu and Pema Dawa from Bhutan, who just had superpowers when it came to bird spotting and hearing. And even, they had all the tricks. They'd use the laser pointers, but when you got a bird like this, even with the laser pointer, sometimes it's really, really hard to find it. Here is an alpine accenter, which may take you a moment to see. This photo is courtesy of fellow traveler Nancy Siepman. Here's our accenter in its habitat there. Close up, you can see it's a sparrow-like bird. It is not a sparrow, but it's behaves much like a sparrow, and it looks like a sparrow, but it just blends in perfectly with the lichens and the rock and the dead leaves. So these were a challenge to find. Here's another blending in bird, the gray-winged blackbird, female on the left here, who is just the exact color of the soil that she's hopping on, and her mate, the male, is over here on the right. He's much easier to see, much more colorfully or at least brightly marked. Here's a Sikkim tree creeper. another bird that's endemic to the Himalayas, and so limited mostly to Nepal and Bhutan. It's the same genus as our brown creeper, and it looks almost exactly the same. And as you can see, it is just as perfectly disguised as our brown creepers. This is the abundance map from eBird, showing you the places where it's there have been sightings reported. This is the elusive chestnut-headed tesia. We heard this bird many times in many places, but this was the only place we saw it, despite spending a lot of time looking for it. It is an adorable, tiny, mouse-like bird without a tail that lives deep, deep in the thickets. And the Bhutan thickets, I have to say, are very, very thick. We had just a few glimpses of this guy as it darted across this little sort of window of bare branches within the thicket. It's another Himalayan exclusive, except its range goes a little farther east into Myanmar. But Myanmar is a tough place to think about birding. An orange-bellied leaf bird here. Not all cryptic birds are brown and gray. This female leaf bird is the same size and shape as the leaves, and her color matches the green leaves perfectly. The males of this species are more colorful. They have a bright black and blue facial pattern, but the females might as well be invisible. I was really, this was just, I mean, I was so thrilled that I actually had a picture of it and could see it, because sometimes you're looking up there and you just don't know. Just don't know what you're getting. Okay, here's a satyr tragopan, and you can see these dots, very colorful dots back here, and down below you probably wouldn't recognize it as such, but that is the bird's tail. The tragopan, this satyr tragopan, is near threatened and also endemic to the Himalayas. It's one that people really, really wanted to see, but it's very scarce. The bird itself isn't really very cryptic, but conditions for birding aren't always perfect, as you can imagine. This one ran across the road in front of our bus at night and flew up in the trees, so it made it really tough to get a decent photo. So I apologize for this photo, but if it were in the light of day, this is what we would have seen, which is a really gorgeous bird. Just fantastic colors and patterns. So nevertheless, we were thrilled to see it hidden behind the leaves, and at night. It was we felt very fortunate to see what we saw. It's not just the birds that play hide and seek. This cute little Assam macaque was hiding behind the leaves, spying on us and gobbling up berries as fast as it could. We saw 4 species of monkeys in Bhutan and another 4 in Thailand. And each time it was fun to watch them because they're active. Well, sometimes they're just hanging around, but sometimes they were actively chasing each other and swinging in the trees, just being their monkey selves. So next few slides I have are people and landscapes and kind of scenes from daily life. We were all interested in this national dress. It's worn by school children and government workers, and about half the people we encountered. It's not mandatory, but people do seem to take pride in their national dress, and it's worn very frequently. The women wear this ankle length garment. You can see in the upper left here. it's made from one piece of fabric, and they've got their special wrapping method. There's no buttons or zippers. It's wrapped and tied. So it seems very complicated to our Western sensibilities. The men wear a knee-length kilt kind of garment that's similar, but just not quite as long. Over here on the bottom right, this gentleman at the market in the orange robe is a Buddhist monk. And the three guys over here looking kind of bashful are actually our cooks in front of a roadside temple where we had stopped for lunch. We didn't interact with the Bhutanese people other than our guides and cooks, since we were busy birding, but they seemed to us to be very quiet, very mellow, unhurried people. There were no loud voices, no boisterous behavior. I mean, except for kids, but just, people seemed very respectful of each other and us. And it was just interesting that then in contrast, we just seemed like a noisy, rowdy bus full of hooligans. And the difference was just really quite striking. And the country as a whole just oozes calm and in a very attractive way. It's just really pleasant to be among people who were so serene. And these two little kids were just cuties, just looking. This little girl is clearly checking me out, and the little boy in the corner, he was making funny faces at me. I thought that was really sweet. Just some scenes from our mealtime stops. You can see it was very civilized dining with our tablecloths and comfy chairs. Here in the lower left, this is a potato truck that's decorated to the hilt. A lot of trucks were had very custom paint jobs. It was fun to see. And this is a Chorten, a little sort of a mini temple. There were many of these along the roadsides, and we often stopped near these for our lunches. This is just a typical landscape, and I wanted to show you the houses and the architecture. Bhutanese people typically have multiple generations living in one home. The houses are usually 2 stories. This tall building here is a community building because it has a red roof, and the houses have green roofs. The bottom floor of the houses is always reserved for animals and for storage. And the top floor is where the living space, people, sleep and eat and carry on daily lives. There's often additional storage space underneath the roofs. You can see there's a gap, sort of an air gap between the roof and the roof proper and the top of the structure. The buildings look similar by law. And they have these elaborate symbols painted on the outside to bring good luck and prosperity and fertility, etc., to the inhabitants. And the uniformity just gives the villages a very beautiful, peaceful look. And one thing we did see often were chilies drying. People grow and preserve much of their own food, so hence all the need for storage space. And they use the tops of the roofs for drying chilies, which is a really important part of their diet. Chili is the national dish called emadatsi, is basically chilies and cheese, and that was offered or present at pretty much every meal we had. There was never a shortage of chilies. The roads, as I said, were rough, and mountain roads have plenty of switchbacks. Top left here. The good news is that Bhutan is hard at work improving this major cross-country road. The bad news is those improvements mean that traffic on the one-lane road stops while work is being done. In the picture on the right, our bus is on the opposite side of this group of people picking their way across the rocks, which are rocks in the middle of the road that have fallen down this giant hill from the construction that's taking place at the top of the hill. So we had to wait for the bulldozer to come down the hill and clear those rocks away. Meantime, we just picked our way across the rocks and proceeded to bird on the road ahead, and the bus caught up with us eventually when the road was cleared. But that's we frequently stopped for construction activity, which you just it's just extra birding time for us. It wasn't really a big problem, but you need to be patient in Bhutan for some of these things. The bottom left, this is just showing the scars along the mountainside. The road, the road is cut through right through the middle of those scars, and so it was kind of ugly but necessary part of the road improvement. Okay, I'll get back to birds in a minute, I promise. But first, some vegetation info, because I know there's lots of plant lovers among the Audubon members, and you can actually sign up for plant tours of Bhutan if the birds aren't enough to entice you. As I mentioned before, Bhutan has 5,600 species of flowering plants, including all the rhododendrons and orchids, etc. It is just a plant geek paradise. So it was very frustrating for me. I had to focus on the birds, but there were all these fantastic plants all around. High elevations in Bhutan are dominated by the pine, fir, and hemlock forests. Rhododendrons grow up to about 19,000 feet to their understory plants. The rhododendron leaves are actually swept up from the forest floor to be used as bedding for cows. So we saw people doing that several times. This is pretty typical of middle elevations. There are still lots of pines and larch, with the deciduous broadleaf trees become more prevalent as you descend. You can see, I think this is Jomolhari back here. I'm not absolutely positive, but these are some Himalayan peaks in the background there. Lowlands are dominated by these lush forests of bamboo and ferns and vines. Here, the funny vertical white stalks are bamboo. This is just close up of real bamboo. And this was the first time I had seen bamboo in the wild, so I was pretty happy. And where you have bamboo, you have red pandas. So this was a huge surprise, kind of like that satyr tragopan running across the road. There was another slam on the brakes and, yelling to look in the tree, and we all stuck our cameras out though and hoped we were getting something that we'd be able to recognize. The red pandas these faces are adorable. They're endangered. There are fewer than 10,000 remaining in the wild, mostly because of loss of habitat and poaching. The Bhutan population is relatively safe, in part because the Buddhist religion forbids killing, and so there's not a lot of hunting, certainly of pandas and or anything else in Bhutan. And the country has vowed to keep at least 60% of its land forested and protected. Currently, 70% of the land is forested. They do have some forest industry, but they will not let it go below 60%. Fall is not the best time for blooming plants, of course, but gentians are one of my favorite flowers. And I was really thrilled to see this gentian tucked into some rocky crevices along the road. Of course, gentians are late bloomers here too, so it wasn't entirely a surprise. This is giant taro, just growing along the road, out in the wild. And this is a wild begonia. I guess I had never given any thought to the fact that there were wild begonias, so it was another kind of fun surprise to come across this. In the again, all of these pretty much are just along the road. Orchids and epiphytes growing on tree trunks. So you know you're not in Kansas anymore. And poinsettias, oh my gosh, poinsettias are not native to Bhutan, but they are planted widely as ornamental shrubs. So we encountered many spectacular hedges of blooming poinsettias. It was just, the right time of year to be there for the blooms. And I had no idea that they grew so robustly in a favorable environment. My idea of poinsettia is the little pot that you see at Home Depot. And now I can't wait to go to Mexico and see them growing there. They were just really beautiful ornamental bushes. Okay, back to birds. The laughing thrushes are a big family. There were 4 pages of them in my bird book. They're colorful and they're sociable, so we heard them often, but they were surprisingly hard to spot because most of these species are jungle dwellers where the vegetation's pretty dense. So we're happy when you get one to sit up and pose. Here's another of the redstart species, Hodgson's redstart. The female shows a tail pattern. This is a female. Her tail pattern is similar to our American redstart. And thanks to Nancy again, who managed to get a picture of the female showing off her pretty colors. This is a silver-eared mesia, just a really beautiful little bird. It also has a bright red rump that's not shown, but it's another flitty one. It's very active, and sadly, it's often captured for the cage bird trade. This was one of our group's top 5 birds of the trip, the silver-eared mesia. Here's another cutie and another of the top 5 birds, the black-throated parrotbill. These guys also super active. I'm seeing a kind of a theme in what kinds of birds I like. I like the ones that jump around a lot. They were hopping around in a big flock. They came and went in the matter of a minute. Hopping around in this bamboo. You can actually see there's another one hiding back here and another one way down here, just barely peeking out. But really just, they've got that little baby face. They've got the tiny, tiny little beak and that white eyed, big-eyed look. Really, really cute. The green-tailed sunbirds are more beautiful birds. They use that long curved beak to sip nectar from flowers, just like our hummingbirds do. There aren't any hummingbirds in the old world, Asia, Europe. So sunbirds are one of the birds that take up that ecological niche. They're, tiny, flitty, and pretty, very pretty when viewed from below, but they're even prettier from above. This is the same bird with, just a top view, and that iridescence is just fantastic. I loved these. Oops, come on. There we go. The streaked spider hunter was one of my personal favorites because, how can you not like something named spider hunter? And Bhutan had really big spiders, really, really big spiders. Not to put anybody off, but there were some really major spiders. The spider hunters are fond of sitting at the tops of bushes where they were easy to find. So that also helped make them favorite. Okay, I hope you're all at your computer saying, ooh, this beauty is a tawny fish owl. We were so lucky to find this bird. It's not listed as endangered or threatened. I don't know why, because there just aren't very many of them. And there have only been 800 sightings of it in eBird. That's the fewest I've seen for any bird. I mean, usually, they're at least in the thousands, and around here, the numbers are hundreds of thousands. It's sort of like the red panda of birds. We actually saw a pair. There were two tawny fish owls together here, and it was our number one bird of the trip. Just a really gorgeous, big, awesome bird. This is a scarlet minivet. There were several different minivets, different species. They're forest birds, and yes, it looks just like an oriole, or much like our oriole, and the females are yellow, also like our oriole. And these are common throughout Southeast Asia. A large-billed crow, just a typical crow with a great big honking bill. This one was looking for handouts at lunch. A blue-bearded bee eater. I just liked this. I liked the way it looked. I liked that blue beard. You can see it's actually really is a beard. Kind of those feathers sticking out from its throat. Rufous-necked hornbill. Awesome birds. These guys were hanging out in a sort of a family group, I assume 3 birds. They're categorized as vulnerable. They're not common, just spectacular. We saw 4 more species of hornbills in Thailand. So if that's an incentive to get over to Thailand, but really, really impressive birds. Another spectacular bird, these are the Himalayan monals, which are only found in the Himalayan hill forests. We took a long side trip on a rough road to a remote monastery where they have a local population of these guys, and it was totally worth the detour. Those colors are it's just amazing. These are some very far away black-necked cranes, and it was another side road adventure. They're threatened species that breed in China at high elevations, but they winter at lower elevations in a few spots in Bhutan. And this valley, the Pojika Valley, these 4 birds were the first arrivals for the winter, and I think our guides had it timed almost to the minute. And the valley is protected. When the cranes arrive, no one can them, and no one can walk out there and bother them. Although there was a film crew there when we were there who seemed to be ignoring the rules. But it's a big deal to the community when the cranes arrive. So we were just really happy we caught them at the right time. Okay, here's a few more slides in the weird and wonderful category. Cordyceps is definitely definitely one of the weird ones. Our guides told us that some yak herders at high altitudes make money collecting a fungus called cordyceps that they sell to China, where it's used as an aphrodisiac, an energizer, a general cure-all kind of thing. And they sell it for huge amounts of money, like a quarter pound. I just checked today. A quarter pound sells for $3,500 on the internet. And, you know, when they said fungus, I visualized a mushroom. So I was surprised as I was sampling some cordyceps tea to discover that it's actually a fungus that grows on a caterpillar. And the fungus caterpillar unit is what is ground up and consumed, like in the tea that I was drinking. So on the right here are the sort of petrified caterpillars with a fungus growing out of their heads. And people just harvest these from the grass that they're sticking out of. And on the left here is a package of the caterpillar fungus unit where it's for sale, and the caterpillar component is a little more obvious there. So that was just an interesting adventure, interesting part of the adventure. I mentioned monkeys. We saw these guys, the capped, the golden, and the gray langurs, along with the 4 other species in Thailand. We saw yellow-throated martens twice, and both times they were pairs. And these are beautiful, sleek members of the weasel family that they seemed as curious about us as we were about them. They were definitely checking us out. Yaks wandered around at will. I'm not sure how anyone keeps track of them since there aren't any fences, and we seldom saw people interacting with the yaks. They come in a variety of colors, and this one was my favorite morph, this kind of skunk striped pattern, but mostly they're usually just brown or gray. Black giant squirrels were another surprise. I had no idea they existed. They are indeed giant. This guy is about the size of a raccoon, I'd estimate. But you know, just climbing around like any other squirrel. The honey guide is near threatened. That's this little yellow bird up here, yellow-rumped honey guide. It has a very limited range, so it's just in Bhutan and Nepal. It's always associated with bee colonies. There's this is a colony of bees down here, and it's located under this rock shelf in this hillside. The honey guides are finch-like, but they actually feed on the wax from the combs, not the bees themselves. And they're polygynous, so one male will defends the beehives and his bee combs from other males, but he'll allow multiple females to feed and mate with him. These honeybees, by the way, are the largest honeybee in the world. They are up to 1.2 inches long, and even from a long way away, they looked pretty scary. This mountain hawk eagle was just hanging around while we were watching the honey guides. There were lots of different raptors on this trip. We saw 14 different species, but at least 25 were possible. It's hard for me to photograph flying birds, so I don't have a lot of raptor photos. You know, these are people who care deeply about life when this is a sign by the side of the road, you know, that the government has put up asking people to attend to sick animals if they happen by something in distress. I thought that was just so like Bhutan. It kind of kind of summarized the sensibilities of the people for me. So finally, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Red Hill Birding for making this trip possible, with Josh Engel's extraordinary birding skills, and likewise our local guides, Norbu and Pemadawa. And I want to thank our fellow travelers, especially my husband, Joe, who made the trip a pleasure. It was such a good-natured group of people. I never imagined that sharing a bus for 14 days could be so much fun. And, thank you to the people of Bhutan, too, for caring so much about their land and the birds and the animals that live there, and preserving so much of it for posterity. And thanks to you, too, for attending tonight, of course. And now I can take any questions.
Let's see. We can take it either on audio, or if you unmute yourself, or we can take it in the chat mode.
Let's see. If the problem is, if I go to chat mode, I have to stop. I think I have to stop sharing my screen.
I can read it for you. The
Okay.
question was the temperature ranges. What temperature ranges did you?
Oh, sure. It was quite a bit like here, a little more mild. It was generally in the 30s to 40s in the mornings, and then it would warm up to the 50s, 60s, sometimes up to 70s in the afternoon. It varied a lot with the altitude we were at. Of course, it's really, we had one day we were very high up, I don't know, I get confused between the meters and the feet. 13,000 feet, I think, was the highest pass we went over, and it was darn cold up there. But mostly it was quite comfortable. We generally had jackets, but we wore our jackets and a couple layers in the morning, and by afternoon we were peeling things off and okay in shirt sleeves.
Okay. Another question was, what is the approximate size of the tawny fish owl?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm guesstimating I think it's about as big as a great horned owl. It was big.
Okay. Another question, what camera and lenses were you using?
Oh, I use a Nikon Coolpix 950, P950. So it has this integrated zoom. I don't have to change, swap out lenses. It's marketed for a birding camera, and I've had it for 2 years now, and I really like it a lot, because it's lightweight. So it's much easier than schlepping a great big camera around. It weighs I think about 2.5 pounds.
Rain concerns. Did you see any rain at this time of year that you were here?
No, they have a monsoon season in the later summer, but I think the monsoons end in by October. So it was quite dry. We never did have any rain that we had to worry about. So we were there 2 weeks with no rain. So I think it's weather-wise, it's a great time to be there.
My question was, how did you like the fungus tea?
It just tasted a little musty. It didn't taste particularly like tea. I couldn't tell you if it tasted like caterpillars or not, because I haven't eaten very many of those. But it was not objectionable.
Okay. Did you see any snakes or hear about any snakes?
Yes, they do have snakes. I was surprised. We did not see. Let's see. I saw one dead snake in Bhutan. We didn't see any living snakes. We did see one lizard. So not a lot of reptiles that we saw, but they certainly have them. Thailand, on the other hand, Thailand has a lot, lots of reptiles. So, but nothing to worry about in Bhutan.
It struck me when I was in Central America also that the bird names seem contrived and kind of made up as you go along. And I wonder, what the tradition is of bird watching among the locals, and whether, they had a bird watching tradition that has now crossed over into English, or whether it's the other way around.
Oh, wow. I could not speak to local names for the birds.
Is there like a famous bird book that everybody uses when they go to Bhutan?
Yes. I don't know. Can you see this? This is
I can tell that
birds.
you have a book.
birds of Bhutan and the Eastern Himalayas. This is one. I believe there's another field guide, but this one had everything we needed. Nice color. I mean, it's a nice field guide. I don't think the Bhutanese people themselves have a big culture of bird watching, although they're like I was saying, they're very protective and proud of their wildlife and their country and their their decision to protect their wildlife. It seems like a very important part of their culture.
Okay, somebody would like you to repeat what camera.
Oh, okay. It's a
Maybe put it
Nikon.
in the chat.
Oh,
Well, I can type it. I can type it in.
okay. Let me. Can I?
Yeah, don't.
How do I?
I can type it in if you say it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So it's a Nikon Coolpix, COOLPIX E950.
C is in Charles.
Yeah. Coolpix.
950.
And it's got the zoom is an 82x zoom. And yeah, so it's actually more zooming power than my scope. And then there's a little more, you can get a little more, that's optical zoom. And there's a little bit more digital zoom you can get on top of that. But the quality really degrades with the digital zoom. So.
And then you use that with a tripod?
No, this was all handheld.
Oh, wow. That's remarkable.
Yeah, I've been really happy with this camera. Although, I did have like a major failure in Thailand. So now I'm, but that said, it's been fixed and it works fine again. And so it, I love the weight of it. I love how easy it is to carry and take good pictures. So, and it can do, of course, it can do a million things besides birds, which I am not a photographer. So I do also, although I will say I do always also use it for bumblebees. And so on the macro end, it's not, it's not as good as a regular macro setup that you'd have but it's good enough. It's pretty darn good. And my pictures they're pretty good. People with big cameras and those giant lenses, they can get better pictures, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to schlep those lenses and cameras around.